Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. Today, I am so pleased to have on my guest, Nikki Helms. So thank you, Nikki, for being with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Whenever I read through your jot form, you are one of those people who has many, many, many letters after their name. And I want to make sure that we explain all of your bona fides and credentials and stuff like that. So can you're a nurse, we can start there, but you've got a lot more than just floor nursing behind you.
Yeah, so I like to collect letters apparently. And I just love learning. I feel like you can never stop learning. So I am a nurse by background. I've gone all the way, I've got my doctorate, which is the DNP. I'm also certified in critical care nursing. ICU has been my background. I've just always had a love for it. So next up, though, because I don't have enough letters on my name, my next goal is the patient experience certification. So that'll be coming hopefully in the next year.
Wonderful, wonderful. If I can
Yeah.
be of any assistance with that, you probably don't want to use my help because for the CPXP exam, I remember I scored high enough to pass, and that was all I really cared about.
You know
So
what? That's all you need.
that's all you need. There you go, and get a few more letters. So,
Yep.
excellent. And tell me what you do now with all of these many letters and many certifications.
Yeah, so I do a couple of different things actually. My primary role, I'm actually a patient experience leader with Bon Secours Mercy Health, and I cover one of our many markets in Toledo, Ohio. In addition to that, I also teach on the side at one of our local community colleges. And then I'm also an advisor for the Ohio Board of Nursing for their Nursing Education Advisory Council. So kind of dabble in a little bit of everything because I like to stay busy. And like I said, I just love to keep learning. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
So let's go back to like the beginning. Why nursing? Did you always feel that calling, or what first led you into the field of nursing?
Yeah. So I would say yes, a little bit. I think I've kind of just always had a love for, helping people, adrenaline, all of those kinds of things. My father was actually the fire chief of our local fire department. And I always laugh because looking back, every time the tones would drop, my older brother and I, we would usually race to be in my dad's truck, and often usually in his truck before even dad was there with his gear. So of course, growing up, we spent a lot of time at the fire station and, it's almost like a second home. Usually they found me in the EMS room because I was always, endlessly asking the EMTs just about, their equipment and, what all they did. So it's probably no surprise to anybody that I ended up, in the healthcare field. But, kind of the experience that really kind of finally kind of pushed me into this was, growing up, we had a busy house. My grandma lived with us, my uncle lived with us. And then, of course, I've got two brothers, two sisters, my mom, my dad. So, I mean, it was, never not busy there. But one day, my grandma was coming home from a doctor's appointment and we'd gone grocery shopping and, we were carrying in groceries and my grandma actually fell. She lost her balance and she fell off the steps onto the patio and she ended up breaking her hip. And we lived in a very rural area. So, of course, we took her to the local emergency room and she ended up having to wait in the emergency room for a couple of days before they were able to transfer her to a larger facility where they could do her surgery. And I remember, the surgery had gone well initially. I remember visiting her a few times with my dad. Of course, I've always been mother hen too. So I, would talk with her about, all the ways that I was going to help, around the house when she came home. But one day after my dad and I had visited, there was actually a mistake that was made with my grandma's heparin drip, which is a blood thinner. And she was inadvertently given too much, which ended up causing a brain bleed. So she ended up being intubated, which is, the breathing machine, and she was transferred to the intensive care unit. And her condition actually never really did improve. So I remember visiting my dad, several days later. It was just the two of us this visit. And when we arrived, I remember my grandma was just surrounded by all of the machines. And, really for the first time, I saw my grandma was kind of afraid to approach. I mean, I was only 12 at the time, and I mean, all of that, everything you see in there was just scary. But I had actually spent several days looking for her favorite red rosary at home, knowing that I was coming back up for this visit, and I was hoping that if I had that rosary and gave it to her, that she'd get better and come home. I ended up not finding that one. I ended up finding one of her crystal ones, but I, did muster up my courage, and I went up to her, and I remember placing it in her hand. And, during that interaction, I remember my dad was crying and was asking if she was ready to go home. And of course, given her situation, she didn't respond. We ended up stepping out of the room, and a few minutes later, when we returned, she was no longer connected to all of the machines. At the time, I didn't really know what all of that meant. I remember my dad was crying. I was standing in the corner crying too. And, that's when I kind of realized that my grandma wasn't coming home with us. But, it was in that, kind of moment, though, that I'd say that my world shifted. It wasn't, obviously losing my grandmother, changed our world completely. But there was an experience that happened. As I stood in the corner, of course, I was overwhelmed and crying. And my grandma's nurse walked over and just hugged me. She didn't say a word, but I mean, she knew that that's just what I needed in that moment. It was just that, simple human connection. And, it was just that silent exchange. It was, just all the comfort that I needed, that I didn't know that I needed at the time, but, I needed at the time. And so, it was kind of looking back on that experience, when I, became older and deciding what I wanted to do. Healthcare was an obvious, choice. But being a nurse, especially, kind of two reasons for me. One, from the safety aspect of if I could ever prevent a medical error from happening for someone else's family, I would consider it a win. But then also to be able to be the kind of nurse that offered comfort when it was needed the most, just like that nurse was able to do for me. So, I think that was kind of the moment that it hit.
That's such a beautiful example of compassion, and it's thank you for sharing that. How old were you at that time?
I was 12.
You were 12. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that and losing my first grandparent at 14, and the processing that goes along with that. But what a remarkable example of a nurse seeing your pain and responding to it so compassionately.
Yeah. And I mean, with a simple gesture too.
Mm.
I mean, I think, a lot of times when we talk, about patient experience or, anything like that from, like the healthcare worker's perspective, we often think that it's some grand gesture or something going completely out of your way or something completely unattainable that's going to be a memorable moment for somebody. But sometimes it really is, in my case, it was a hug,
Yeah.
from reading your books, it was a holding of your hand. I mean, it's just that simple human connection, I think, that we often forget and lose, when we get so busy in the day to day.
Well, right. We get busy, but we're still human. And we've just got
Hmm.
to remember to go back to it, right? Return to
Absolutely.
being present. So
Yeah,
let's thank you for sharing that. And
of course.
wow, yeah. So let's move a little further along in life, if you don't mind. I always
Absolutely.
ask some kind of randomy questions. So let's move along from 12-year-old Nikki into 16-year-old Nikki. Say you are with your friends. It's Friday afternoon, Friday evening. School is done. Practice is done. Whatever you're doing during the week is done. What are you and your friends listening to while you're hanging out?
Oh, wow. I was a band geek, and so
Mhm.
were all of my friends. So we were probably listening to ourselves playing more than likely. Um, but, things that would be on the radio would definitely be, I mean, probably one of my favorite bands, Evanescence.
Mm.
They had their first album around that time. So them, and really kind of any of the other, rock type music is what I was really into.
Nice, nice. I I was in band for 3 or 4 years of high school too, and my sister was in symphonic band in college, big marching band. So I got immersed in that culture some, but I wasn't necessarily. What did you play in band?
I played flute
Mhm.
for concert band. I did piccolo for marching band, and then I dabbled with tenor saxophone in jazz band. Um, I would say dabbled because I wasn't good. I was good enough to learn it for the songs, but definitely, was not comfortable. Wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any means. But
I'd
what
say
did you
that
play?
calls that. Well, I played trumpet and baritone, and now I couldn't make an embouchure to save my life, so I switched to guitar. I don't know, whenever I was 21, 22 years old.
That's awesome.
So
I still participate anytime we have alumni band. I always go back and um, both of my sisters and my younger brother were also in bands, so it's kind of a family thing that we
yeah,
all go back and do together. So
yeah, it's you learn a lot of leadership through band as well.
yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So that's a question that I often ask people like yourself who are in various roles of leadership. Whenever I ask the question, "Who taught you leadership?" Who is the first person that comes to mind?
I wouldn't say for me that it's been any one person. Um, I it's it's been a lot from a lot of people. I'll see things that I like from somebody that maybe they did, like when I was a house supervisor on night shift. There was a manager that he would come in frequently, on various hours and stuff, just to say hi to his team, just to see them, and which I worked night shift, so I mean that kind of floored me. So I've kind of taken like little nuggets like that and kind of incorporated them into what I did as a leader, as well as, I mean, learning from leaders that maybe could have done it better, and maybe
Mhm.
what I didn't want to do. The interesting thing though, and kind of even with patient experience and leadership and all of those things, I mean, it all goes back to that relationship building and that connection piece. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that all of my teams knew was that, one, what I even looked like, that I'm a human too, that I've got kids and these are my hobbies and things like that. So I mean, I would make it a goal for them to know me as well as me to know them. And it's served me well. I mean, I think that you build that trust and then your team is willing to talk to you about anything, and kind of the same thing. Not that, I guess parenting kind of is leadership in a way too, but I'm like, same thing with the kids, with that trusting relationship, they know that they can come to me, with whatever that they need to. So again, it's that human connection piece, that I think it all kind of boils back down to.
Yeah. Not rocket surgery, right? It's just
No,
being human. It's just
there's
being
so many
human.
leadership books about it though. You'd think that it
Sure.
was, but I'm like every single one of them, it's all communication and relationships, which I love. I still read them all,
Mhm.
it doesn't stop me, but it's just interesting though.
Do you have a favorite leadership book?
Ooh, I would say probably one of the very first ones that I read was Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, and
Mhm.
it's still one of my favorites, just because, I mean, I kind of have always been from the philosophy of like, my job as a leader is to break down barriers for my team and to support them. If I've got a happy team, then they're by nature going to do their job well and take care of patients, and we're going to have happy patients. So I mean, it's just, my job was for them, their job was for the patients, and that's kind of how I've always viewed it. Even sort of like in my role now, I'd still say, I'm here for the leaders, for them to break down the barriers, to take care of the patients. So it's just trickle down effect.
That book has been on my reading list for years. I've had it downloaded, but I also sit there going, I can learn everything I need to know from the from the title.
Yep.
That's just how you treat your team. It's just how you
Yeah.
treat your team.
Any of Brene Brown's books too are
Mhm.
absolutely fantastic. And I don't know that they necessarily fall into necessarily like the leadership thing, but I mean, vulnerability is a huge piece too. When you talk about being a great leader or you excellent, just person, I think, vulnerability is a needed aspect as well.
Her work around belonging is,
Yes.
I feel like, is so pertinent for healthcare uh, institutions and staff, that how much we can show up for a job every day, but if we don't feel that intrinsically we are there and part of something bigger than we are,
Hmm.
it's hard to it's hard to get true quote unquote buy-in, right,
Yep.
from a staff member. So about that. What are you
Yeah.
currently reading?
Um, fantasy.
Oh, awesome. Tell me about it.
Rereading Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass series. It's
Okay.
like a fairy assassin type thing, just, different, totally different,
Hmm.
Another one that I enjoy reading that I actually just finished was the Harry Potter series
Hmm.
because I'm also that nerd too.
Yeah,
But
same.
yeah, but I was just gifted, oh gosh, what is it called? I was just gifted a book. We had our retreat earlier last week actually for our patient experience team. So we just got a new book that I have on my desk to read, and I'm drawing a blank of what the title is.
No worries, but let me know offline
Yeah,
sometime whenever you think about that, because
absolutely.
I'd love to know what you're reading.
Yeah.
So good stuff. Well, so what do you think is one of the biggest challenges, whether it's for your team or other teams that you've worked with in the past? What do you think the biggest challenge is uh, to get team members to feel like they belong?
Ooh, I think kind of like, what you shared, I think like the belonging is just really coming from the relationship building, having that time to actually connect, having leaders that you trust, that you feel um, able to go and talk to, I think is a crucial aspect. I think that I don't even want to say that it's just healthcare, but I mean, I think that we often undervalue the importance of that frontline manager, of what a crucial role that they play for everything, with your frontline team engagement and satisfaction, you know, um, which of course, it all ties back to your different metrics and things, that you're going to look at too. But I mean, if you don't have the right person in that role to lead the team, that the team trusts, that the team is willing to go to and be vulnerable and all of those things, it's never going to be able to move, and so, you have to have those pieces. And that's why I say, I mean, like, vulnerability, that's why I like Brené's, work so much is because, people think that being vulnerable is a weakness, admitting that you were wrong is a weakness. And honestly, I think it's, a sign of strength, to be able to go to your team and say, hey, I screwed up, but, this is how I'm going to fix it. To be able to go into a patient's room and say, hey, I'm sorry, this happened, but this is how we can move forward. You know, all of those things, people don't like to admit, those kinds of things, or show that piece. But I think having a leader that leads like that, shows the team that it's okay and, can help, move forward.
Trust, as you
Trust.
said, is
Yes.
I love the phrase, and I'm not exactly sure who came up with it. It certainly wasn't me, but that relationships move at the speed of trust.
Yes.
And I think about that in a physical sense from whenever I was a patient, that anytime a caregiver would be treating me, if they moved very, very, very quickly, if they're one of those really high geared people who talks fast, moves fast, acts fast, that would make me feel unsafe. But if
Hmm.
I trusted them, then it didn't feel unsafe. It felt like being part of a trusted relationship.
Yeah. It's interesting that, when we talk about communication, that, I mean, we think that it's the words that we say, but you're right. I mean, it's, the tone, it's the inflection, it's the pace, it's, body language, all of those things is going to tell somebody within seconds whether or not they're going to trust you, whether or not they're going to like you, and I think it's, ever crucial. I learned so much from my kids, as they keep getting older, but my 7-year old, sometimes, because I know that I like to move quickly sometimes. And, he'll tell me, Mom, you're rushing me. It's making me anxious. And it's like, wow, like, we can learn so much from kids just because they are just blunt and honest, sometimes. And, adults, we don't tend to say things like that because, we're afraid we're going to hurt somebody's feelings. But, sometimes though, just taking that step back and being mindful of that, of how, just your, nonverbals can make somebody feel it can change things too.
Sure, sure. I think I've written about that it's that even for somebody who's not looking at you, right? When you walk in the room, a patient who might have vision loss or an impairment of some sort, in there, you're still picking up on that person's quote unquote vibe, right?
Yep.
You're still understanding if that person is fully present there, ready for what comes at them, or if they're kind of emotionally, mentally checked out and just going through the motions. I think we feel that. We
Yeah.
sense that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you kind of pick up on it without meaning to. As an ICU nurse, I mean, it was challenging. I mean, I would sometimes walk from one room where we just had an awful, situation and then, have to take that deep breath and go into that next room and try and act like nothing was wrong, but we're still human too, and so, you know, that's kind of where I think that vulnerability piece, can I tell them everything that happened? Absolutely not. But, I mean, if I am a little bit off and if I am having, a little bit difficult time kind of checking my own, nonverbals and whatnot before I go into the room, I can say, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit off right now. I just dealt with a difficult situation, but I am here for you now, and then be present then for that person, but then that way they aren't sitting there wondering, is it me? Like, what did I do that, made this nurse, feel off? Or, was it something that I did or something that I said, or because I put my call light on? Because I mean, I think as humans too, we always, feel sensitive that it was us, that we're the one that caused, somebody to feel, certain way.
Right, right. Those of us who are geared for feeling other people's emotions, right?
Yeah.
And who have that emotional
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah. Some of that empathy
Yeah.
can be a hindrance, I think.
So, your time in the ICU, this is kind of a strange question that I might throw at you, and
It's okay.
it kind of moves out of the patient experience realm, but into the more spiritual realm. But have you ever witnessed anything in your healthcare career that you would consider to be miraculous?
Oh my goodness. Yes, actually. Many times, really. So my background was cardiac ICU. And so in the unit that I worked in, we had all of the post cardiac arrests. So, there were many times, patients would come in, we'd, look at their, with unknown downtime, maybe family did or didn't start CPR, usually if CPR wasn't started right away, certain labs would, be elevated. We often knew that it probably wasn't going to be a good neurologic outcome. Um, Sometimes though, I mean, we'd be surprised, patients would come in and, there would be. But there was one in particular, and it was actually, I was still in training. I was still a brand new baby nurse. And I don't know, I don't know if like, the assignment happened just by chance or what, but my preceptor and I actually ended up withdrawing support on, we were supposed to withdraw support on both of our patients. The one had, a lot of family around and everything. And, that, made my heart full. Everything, went, the way that it should be. The other one, though, had been a challenging patient because, for weeks, this patient was not responding. They had had the breathing tube in for quite a long time. We were concerned, about, it eroding, their airway, but they weren't a candidate for a trach just because, of contractures and things like that. And, the family, had been very adamant, that mom was still in there and that, she was going to pull through. And of course, like all of, the ICU scientific brain, in all of us were like, she's not. So it was the day that she was supposed to withdraw. We had withdrawn support on our other patient pretty early. So, we ended up with only the one patient. So, the family wasn't coming in until later that afternoon to withdraw support on this other patient. So my preceptor and I, we ended up going down to the gift shop and we bought some nail polish and, got a new hairbrush and stuff and went back up, to really kind of pamper this, lady before we withdrew support. And so I was, moving around the room and my preceptor was actually painting her nails. And as I walked across the room, my preceptor noticed that this patient's eyes had opened and looked like she had actually watched me walk across the room. And so she was like, hey, Nikki, walk across the room again. And so I did. And of course, like the patient, followed again. And sure enough, she was in there. And so, we ended up not withdrawing care. And, it ended up that she was extubated, I think about like a week or so later, and ended up going, to a long-term care facility. But it was just incredible because, I mean, everything science, was
Mhm.
pointing one way. And just in that midst, I mean, I'm glad we just happened to be in there painting her nails and just pampering her, in what we thought, would be that. And instead we were, just getting her ready to welcome her family back, and, the miracle that had happened for sure.
Wow. Wow. That's so, yeah. I love stories like this.
Yeah.
I've always thought that, I would love to write a book on kind of the sacred stories of nursing and care within the hospital walls. And that would be a great one for
Yeah.
it. That would be a great one
I
for it.
always said too, I mean, all of the unhappy stories that we would often see in that unit, because it was the tough unit to work in. But it was moments like that though, or, the moments that, we would take people off of like their sedation and everything, after we had, we did hypothermia, to help. So there's certain protocol. But, I always loved it when, I got to be the nurse that turned off all of those medications, and, ask them if they could squeeze my hand. And when you would feel them squeeze your hand, like it was just a feeling like no other, just, I've always felt like, it was a huge celebration in my own, mind and body, and like, go out and, cheer, with my, coworkers. It was just always such an incredible, fulfilling moment, to be able to then give an update to a family that, hey, your loved one is still in there, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to be better. So,
Wow. Well, I feel like this interview today couldn't have been better. So thank you for all of
absolutely.
this today. I do have last question for you, and that is, if you had the ability to have your message to the world that would be printed on the world's largest billboard on the world's tallest mountain, what's the message that you would most like to broadcast to humanity?
Oh gosh. I think I would go to the quote of, in a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Hmm.
I think kindness is needed everywhere, you know. So that's what I would share.
It's beautiful. That's simple, right? Again,
Yeah.
it's not rocket surgery. It's just
Nope.
being human, just being human. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Nikki. It's been such a pleasure to have you on today and share your insights and your stories. And
Absolutely.
I
Thank
just
you for having
really,
me.
really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for being on today. Again, this is Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast that teaches compassionate communication, provides perspective, and inspires resilience. Please visit marcusengel.com for keynote speaking needs, healthcare consulting, books, etc., etc. Thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Compassion and Courage.